Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NCAA Tournament Sweet 16 Betting Pick Show. My name is Dylan Burd, here once again on the Sports Bird podcast, and we got a very special guest talking Sweet 16 bets with us today. It is a fellow Penn State alum, Jared Smith of Sports Grid. What's up, Jared? Happy to be talking Sweet 16.
Yeah, and it's not like we're talking Penn State in the Sweet 16. Although I am optimistic. Coach Shrews, I saw him today hanging out with Mike Tomlin. Maybe some of that winning will brush off a little bit. But yes, no Penn State in the Sweet 16, but plenty of other games to get to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. We got 8 great games here. So one quick topic I wanted to touch on, as I said, 8 great games. Are they really great games? Obviously, a lot of people love the upsets in March Madness, but it's a little bit tough because sometimes, the ideal game is Arkansas playing against maybe a better team than Oral Roberts in the Sweet 16. So my question to you, just to start off here, is how much do you think upsets, how at what point do you say upsets are like too much in the tournament? Obviously, everyone loves them in the first round, but then when they could start to impact the actual quality of matchups as we go on here in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. I got asked this question about like, what's the profile at this stage? Like the first weekend, it's more about like surviving. It's such a crazy opening weekend, and it was even crazier this year. The second weekend is a little more refined. Like you don't see teams that are the Cinderellas. They don't carry that level of play that they had in the first. Like if you're a Cinderella like an Oral Roberts, and you play at the same level the second weekend than you did the first weekend, I don't consider you a Cinderella anymore. You're just a really good basketball team. So I think that to me is like where I kind of draw the line. I would put Oral Roberts as outside of the realm of having a chance to really win and have success in a weekend like this. Honestly, the other 15 teams I think are all live. And I think the matchups maybe for the Creighton Gonzaga bracket maybe is a little tougher because Gonzaga is such a dominant team. But the other brackets, I mean, I wouldn't put it past Loyola or an Oregon State or, a Houston who obviously has a higher seed, but maybe isn't from a well-known conference. I wouldn't put it past any of those teams to make the Final Four. And I think Cinderella really only fits for the Oral Roberts team. I think the other teams in the field are really good basketball teams, just maybe weren't seeded as high as they should have been.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if you look at all the analytical rankings, whether it's KenPom, another website I use called hazelmetrics.com, if you look at they rank teams based on efficiency, obviously 1 through 353 or however many Division I basketball teams are. And all these teams have pretty much, other than Oral Roberts, have climbed up pretty high in these analytical rankings, but they truly are good basketball teams. First, before we get started here, just wanted to mention that you could follow Jared on Twitter at Jared Lee Smith. You could also follow me on Twitter at sports_bird. Let's get right to it here. The first game on Saturday, we got number 8 Loyola Chicago against number 12 Oregon State. Loyola Chicago favored by 6.5 in this game. The over-under coming in at 125. What are your thoughts on this game? All I have to say is that this is going to be a slugfest, and if you don't like slow-paced games, if you don't like low-scoring games, this is probably not the game for you.
No, and honestly, Oregon State is so underrated. I love this Oregon State team so much. The one thing I learned in the first weekend of the tournament was usually I rely on teams that are better defensively. Like if you're outside of the top 40 in adjusted defense, I don't really give you a whole lot of credence to win an NCAA title. But this Oregon State team is kind of defying that. And what they're doing is they're doing it because they're just so darn efficient. Offensively, I'm learning that teams that run at the slowest tempos but have the highest offensive ratings are the teams that are having the most success. And Oregon State's got a much better offense, statistically at least, than they do defense. And I just think Wayne Tinkle is just a very underrated coach. This Ethan Thompson kid, the senior, they've got a lot of, upperclassmen players. They've got some size in the middle. They're not a team that's going to get out muscled. They just don't really have any weaknesses. They're not a great shooting team. They're a good free throw shooting team, which certainly helps, but they're not a great overall shooting team. And I think that's where against Loyola, they might struggle to find consistent offense. But you're going to give me 6.5 points against a team that I think is on paper better athletically and physically. I think the coaching matchup, I give the slight edge to Porter Moser, who's a tremendous coach, but I think Wayne Tinkle is a little underrated in that regard. I think the value says Oregon State here getting 6.5. I see this as a 1-2 possession win for Loyola, and I think Oregon State's a very live dog as well.
Yeah, I think you make a few good points about Oregon State. Personally here, I'm all over Loyola Chicago. Minus 6.5 yet is a lot, but this is a team that I could not have been more impressed. Like maybe I'm a little biased here because Illinois was my winner pick. So I expected, Illinois to handle that Loyola Chicago team. Of course, I expected, to sweat it out a little bit. Loyola ranking really high in KenPom overall, 9th in KenPom overall, despite being an 8th seed in the tournament. Look, I was just so impressed how it seems like Porter Moser ran complete circles around Brad Underwood, and the fact that Loyola Chicago, they had an open look seemingly every single offensive possession, whereas Illinois was working so hard for shots on the offensive end. And just this Loyola team, they are elite defensively. They rank 1st in adjusted defense in KenPom, 3rd in defensive efficiency on hazelmetrics.com. They're also a solid offensive team. Obviously, they're led by Cameron Krutwig, who is the senior 3rd-team All-American, and he's like their Jokic. Like I saw a lot of people tweeting about that. He's just a big man inside that, you're going to look at him and you're going to say, how is this guy so good at basketball? He's not really athletic, but he's just such a smart player, a great passer, and I'm huge on this team. I feel like Oregon State, they are red hot right now, but I think that it's possible that they could fall a little bit back down. And I think that another stat I brought up here is that Loyola Chicago has been so good on defense this year that they have only given up more than 59.5 points. So 60 or more points they've only given up in 7 out of 30 games this season. The team total over under for Oregon State is at 59.5 here. So I am leaning towards taking the under, especially with both teams playing an incredibly slow pace. Loyola ranks 342nd in adjusted tempo on KenPom, whereas Oregon State also 303rd in adjusted KenPom. So this is going to be a slow, low scoring game. I expect Loyola to, really just, tighten up on defense again. And I think Oregon State doesn't score a lot of points. I think that Oregon State's team total under hits at under 59.5. And I do like Loyola as well at minus 6.5.
Yeah, listen, I can't argue with your cap and your numbers. It's just, there's something about this Oregon State team that I feel like they've got the moxie right now. I think I saw they're 11 or 12-1 against the spread in their last 13. And I think Loyola's in a unique spot here, Dylan. They've never been the favorite before. Usually they're the underdog. And that's where I kind of, not saying they're not going to win the game, but when it comes to covering a number like that, I think it's a different vibe when you're the favorite going in. I'd be willing to bet that they probably haven't been a favorite against a high major team, maybe ever. A Power 5 conference team. This might be the first time they've ever been favored against a Power 5 conference team. So I'm fascinated how they handle this role. Usually they are the David, not the Goliath. This time they're expected to win. They're expected to win handily. And I'm not saying they're not a well-coached team, but it's just, to me, it's a bit of a different vibe. And I think the points, I think the points would be the way I would take it here.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point you bring up about Loyola rarely being the favorite. It will be interesting to see how they handle this, but let's move on to Baylor, the number 1 seed against the number 5 seed Villanova. Baylor comes in -7. That line, I believe, has moved from, I believe it opened at -6. Over under at 141 in this game, 141.5 in this game. Baylor they've flipped a switch back on because it looked like they were sleeping towards the end of the season. They played that weird game against Hartford in the opener where they didn't really look good. They kind of looked like they were sleeping through that, but they woke up against Wisconsin. This team that we saw from November, December, January, before they had their COVID break, this team returned and they looked really, really good. And look, they run into a Villanova team here that's without Colin Gillespie, who's out for the year, averaged 14 points per game, 4.6 assists per game on the season. He's out for the season, so he won't be there. One interesting stat that I found with Villanova that I'm really interested in, especially against this Baylor team. So they do play at a slow pace, 332nd in adjusted tempo on KenPom, and they never turn the ball over. I mean, just rarely at all. They rank 1st in offensive turnover percentage, meaning that they have the lowest turnover percentage in the entire country on KenPom. Also 2nd in offensive steals percentage on KenPom, which means that they don't turn the ball over at all. Baylor is a team that feasts off these forced turnovers. They rank 3rd in KenPom on the defensive side of turnover percentage and 6th on the defensive side in steals percentage. So I'm curious to know if this Villanova team could possibly be kind of a kryptonite to Baylor in the fact that they don't turn the ball over and they play extremely slow.
Absolutely. They're a very well-coached team. The only issue that I see with this game from a dog perspective is I just don't think Nova's managed up in competition since the Gillespie injury. So they've been fantastic against Winthrop, against North Texas. They played a tough game against Georgetown, but they haven't been tested by a really good team with really good players since Gillespie went down. That to me is the one thing that scares me about this Nova team. I don't like the matchup inside Vidal against Robinson Earl. Robinson Earl was able to stretch the floor against Winthrop and North Texas. They did not have bigs that wanted to get out there and guard him. He made a ton of threes in that first game. And, Nova could do no wrong in the second game. I think the matchups favor Baylor. I think Gillespie was a big heart of that team. And the talent is still there. They were talented enough to beat Winthrop without Gillespie. They were talented enough to beat North Texas without Gillespie. I don't think they're talented enough to beat Baylor without Gillespie. So now you're telling me that I'm betting a dog. That's a 7-point dog, still sizable dog, but I have no faith that Villanova can win this game. And I think it's Baylor's game to win. It's just a matter of how much. If they're hot from three, they can win this game by 20. I think the matchups is what pushes me off the dog here. I don't love Baylor in this spot. I don't love laying it with a Baylor team that has not really been to the Final Four yet and has really shown that they can win in a big spot yet. But they're red hot. And I think the matchups favor Baylor here. I especially like the backcourt. I think that really long athletic Baylor backcourt is going to be a problem for the Nova guards, especially now that Gillespie's out. It's the Archie Diacono kid who's just, not quite as athletic as a Teague or a Butler. And I just think the matchups favor Baylor in this spot. I wouldn't go crazy here, but if I had to pick this game, I would lean Baylor.
Yeah, I'm on the exact same page as you. One other thing that I'm worried about with Villanova is you mentioned that, you don't love picking teams that are not great defensively. I mean, we saw Iowa, Iowa and Ohio State, both teams that were great offensively this season and can't play defense. I mean, we saw Iowa get blown out of the building by Oregon, who isn't a great defensive team themselves. We'll talk about that later on. But one thing here, with Villanova is they aren't great defensively. 71st in adjusted defense on KenPom, 237th in defensive 3-point percentage as well. Baylor is first in 3-point percentage at 41.5%. So I think Baylor could really drop a lot of threes on them. And I think that makes me say that if I had to choose, I would go Baylor. But again, like you said, I'm not huge on that number as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and we'll move on now to the number 3 seed Arkansas against number 15 Oral Roberts. Arkansas favored by 11.5 in this game, over under at 159. These two teams actually played earlier in the regular season. Arkansas won the game 87-76, so kind of right near that, that spread. Arkansas, they're a team that is elite defensively. They're really athletic, led by Moses Moody, a guy who's probably going to be a top 10 pick, averaging 17.1 points per game as a freshman, 37.4% from three. This Arkansas team, I mean, this feels completely like Oral Roberts run like ends right here. I just don't know how much is Arkansas actually going to win by. I could see them winning by 20, but Oral Roberts is a team that if they could explode from three, and yes, this is a great 3-point shooting team, 14th in the country in 3-point percentage. We know that they have Max A. Smith, who is the NCAA's leading scorer right now in the nation. This Oral Roberts team, and we saw it against Florida. If they get hot from three, they could possibly keep the game closer than expected. Personally, I think Arkansas could possibly run through them just because of the athleticism, and Arkansas is the type of defense that Oral Roberts has not seen thus far. Obviously, I've mentioned before, Ohio State couldn't play defense to save their lives in that game, nor could they, play defense all season. Florida was kind of just an average team all the way around. This is going to be a type of team that Oral Roberts hasn't exactly run into yet. The question is, will they be able to make enough threes to, stay in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the only way that they stay in the game. So you have to bet. That's your bet. Your bet is, does Oral Roberts make a bunch of threes? If yes, all right, well, then they're probably going to cover the number. If not, I see Arkansas winning this game by 20. Oral Roberts has been out rebounded. They're a minus 30 on the glass in their 2 tournament games. They won both of those games. That is an anomaly. For you to get out muscled on the glass like that in 2 straight games and to win both games, you're playing with some volatile statistical anomalies there. That won't happen a third time in a row. So Arkansas is definitely winning this game. You're right. It's just a matter of 11 being a very, I would say it's a fair number. But again, the reason that I really am leaning towards Arkansas in this spot is just the matchups. I watched that Oral Roberts. I mean, these teams played each other already this year. Oral Roberts had a huge lead at the half. And then Arkansas finally woke up in the second half, and they won the game by 11. They were down 10 at the half, and Arkansas outscored them by 21 in the second half. I might be off by the numbers there. No, I was right. 40-30 was the score at half. Oral Roberts had a 40-30 lead, and they got outscored 57-37 in the second half. So that's not great. That's not a great second half. And I think Arkansas probably sleptwalked through the first half. Eric Musselman will not allow that to happen in the first half of a Sweet 16 game. And that's why I think if Arkansas plays 2 complete halves, they're going to win this game. They're going to cover this game. You want to play Arkansas in the first half, get it for 5 or 6 or wherever the line is. I think that's a good play, but I think Arkansas laying 11 is also a fine play. I just feel like the matchup favors Arkansas, and even though it's a lot of points, I'm going to trust my cap and I'm going to go with the Razorbacks.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned something about, just matchups and rebounding here. Oral Roberts, they are abysmal rebounding. They actually rank 332nd in the country in offensive rebounding percentage allowed at 33.3%. So basically that means that shots that go up and miss, 1/3 of the time it's going to the other team as for an offensive rebound. You face an Arkansas team here that's really athletic. And even though Arkansas, they're not great at offensive rebounding, but all they have to be is decent to the point where they're probably going to, bury Oral Roberts there as well. So yeah, I would lean towards Arkansas as well. Moving on here to number 2, Houston against the number 11 seed, Syracuse. Houston favored by 6 in this game, over under coming in at 140. This is probably the most interesting matchup for me of this entire slate, just because Syracuse, you could look at their numbers, but for whatever reason, Syracuse is a double-digit seed in March. Just throw all the numbers out the window. And this team has just been absolutely red hot lately. Obviously, Buddy Boeheim, this guy seems like he could pull up from 35 feet and it's going to go in. But Houston's a team that, look, I have a feeling Syracuse will be popular here as a bet because, look, it's Syracuse compared to a team like Houston. Houston, as you said before, doesn't come from a great conference. They're in the American Athletic Conference. But Houston, they really are a great team. So well-rounded, 7th in adjusted offense on KenPom, 11th in adjusted defense on KenPom. So this is it. And both websites, Haslametrics and KenPom that I use, they rank 4th overall. So this Houston team is no joke. The question is Syracuse going to be hot enough to, continue this streak and possibly squeeze out a win here against Houston?
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right. Syracuse is definitely a public dog. I don't seem to care much, though. I mean, honestly, I can't lay 6 points with this Houston team that just struggles to shoot it so much. Can Houston have a good shooting night? Sure. But they're outside the top 100 in both of the key metrics, effective field goal percentage and 3-point percentage. So I would not classify them as a good shooting team. They're a really good defensive team, and that scares me because this game could be a rock fight. But if it's a rock fight, I'd rather take the 6 points and hope that it stays close. Houston had a really bad shooting game against Rutgers, like under 40% bad. So if they do that again, they will not win this game. They've got to shoot better, especially from 3, if they want to beat the Syracuse team. Buddy Boeheim is playing at Jerry McNamara-like levels right now. I would not fade him at this stage. You're giving me 6 points. I think the money line is live here. I think this is my favorite underdog money line of the weekend because I just think Syracuse plays a style that it has nothing to do with coaching. Kelvin Sampson's a great coach. They've played each other in Elite Eights before in the early 2000s when he was on Oklahoma. He's coached against this zone before, but the players haven't played against it. And when you're out there on the floor, the coach can only say so much. It's the players that have to make the plays. I think the Grimes kid is one heck of a player. And if anyone can make decisions and, on the fly, it's Quentin Grimes, who's, an upperclassman, certainly has the ability to take over tempo of a game. But I'm sorry. I just feel like Syracuse getting points is the way to go here. I don't care how public it is. I don't like the shooting numbers for Houston, and I can't ask them to lay double figures against this defense or lay 2 possessions against this defense, considering that they haven't shot it well at all for most of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you completely. I'm on Syracuse +6 in this game. Again, there are a few stats that are concerning for Syracuse in this game. Syracuse ranks 340th in offensive rebounding percentage allowed at 34.2%. And Houston is one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. So this could be a problem. Also, Houston, as you said before, they defend the perimeter really well. 1st in effective field goal percentage on defense per KenPom, 12th in defensive 3-point percentage at 29.3%. But again, I feel like Syracuse, like you said, I think this could be kind of be a dogfight. to the point where if Syracuse could kind of just shoot average from three, I don't even know if they have to have the type of explosion that they did. If they could be, pretty much average, I think that they cover this 6-point number here.
Yeah, no, I'm on the cues for sure.
Yeah, and before we get to Sunday games, just wanted to talk to everyone about Monkey Knife Fight. Monkey Knife Fight is a great place for player prop games. You could play prop games for each individual college basketball game here or the entire slate. So if you like player props, want to check that out, you could enter the promo code Dude50 and you'll get an 100% matchup bonus up to $50. That link is in the description below for this video. Promo code Dude50 on Monkey Knife Fight. Now let's get right to it here. The Sunday games. The first Sunday game we have is number 1 Gonzaga against number 5 Creighton. 2:10 p.m. Eastern time tip. Gonzaga favored by 13.5, over under at 158. Look, this is a number that I think is extremely high. But it's warranted with Gonzaga. This is the most efficient team in the history of KenPom's database, which lasts 20 years. And so in this efficiency stat on KenPom, Gonzaga has a adjusted efficiency margin at 37.12, and the next highest out of any team left in the field, Baylor, at 29.74. That is just a monster difference from, the first best team to the second best team. Gonzaga, they're an offensive juggernaut. We know that they're such a deep team. You got Suggs, Kispert, Timmy, Nembhard, Ajayi. I really would be shocked if they lose, honestly, the rest of the tournament, maybe up until they play Baylor. If they were to play Baylor in the final, I just think this Gonzaga team is extremely good. I'm so mad at myself for even overthinking it, I feel like, and putting Illinois against them. To beat them, I should say, in the championship. But again, hindsight's 2020. That being said, they do play a Creighton team here. Creighton's pretty well-rounded. They are, pretty decent offensive team, pretty decent defensive team. I just think ultimately it's not going to be enough to keep up with Gonzaga. The question is Gonzaga going to cover this 13.5 number? They're basically valuing Creighton the same as they did Oklahoma. Now, I think here it's interesting. Oklahoma, they played almost what seems like for Oklahoma, almost a perfect game for them, and they still lost by a decent amount, lost by double digits. So the question is, how close does Creighton keep this game?
I'll be honest, this spread is probably spot on. And I feel like Creighton is a team that is very Jekyll and Hyde. I feel much more comfortable playing the first half over with Gonzaga at 74. It's moving up a little bit. I think it's still 75 in most spots. The Zags lead the nation in first half scoring. They're averaging 40, almost 46 in the first half. And Creighton's the top 40 first half scoring team. So I don't see a slow start. Maybe they don't make shots, but I don't see either team trying to play slow in this game. So I like the tempo. I like the fact that both of these teams are coming off high scoring games in the first half. Gonzaga dropped 46 against Oklahoma, Creighton at 39 against Ohio. And it takes the spread out of the equation here. And I can just rely on the fact that I got two efficient offenses especially with Creighton, a really, really, really good guard. With Gonzaga, I have multiple good guards and a really good big. And I'll just take the aggression of both coaches here. Mark Few certainly has a lot to prove. And I know that Gonzaga is the number one team and they're the number one team for a reason. But listen, they have not yet won a championship despite going to a million Final Fours and a championship game recently. So they still have a chip on their shoulder, despite the fact that they're 26-0 and the number one team in the country. And listen, you've got a lot of questions about Greg McDermott, his future at Creighton. So I think both teams are going to come out kind of hair on fire. And I love the pace that both teams play at. And I think it's right for a first half over.
Yeah, I think you make a great point there. I'm probably going to stay away from the actual game line for sure. We'll see if I end up doing anything first half, but I do think the game line is pretty spot on. It's kind of tough to bet Gonzaga in a Sweet 16 game minus 13.5, despite the fact that it is a warranted line. But I do love Gonzaga. Again, I would be shocked if they lose the rest of the tournament. But let's move on here to, again, one of the most interesting matchups of this entire slate. Definitely the most interesting matchup of this Sunday slate, in my opinion. We got number 1 Michigan against number 4 Florida State. Really the only chalk we got left. 5 p.m. tip. Michigan favored by 2 points in this game, over under at 143.5. The line, I believe, opened up at 3, has already moved to 2 for Michigan. Look, Michigan is a really good team, but the question is, are they as good without Isaiah Livers? And the real answer to this is we don't know what the difference is between when they're with Livers, when they're without Livers. Look, playing against LSU, who can't defend at all, I don't really think that that's a great way to judge whether or not Michigan's going to be the same on offense with or without Livers. And I mean, look, again, LSU outside the top 100 in that spot. So it was tough to judge. But I think that Michigan could struggle in this game. I don't think they're going to be as good on offense with Livers. Livers is a lights out 3-point shooter. So you take him away, it takes away a lot of spacing. And then you also have Dickinson inside. Dickinson is a guy who they love to, run a lot of stuff through. And FSU is the number 1 team, according to KenPom, in height. So they're a huge team. They always are. It's just the way Leonard Hamilton builds his teams. And I think that FSU, I like them a lot, +2 here. One other interesting stat that I brought up with Michigan and Florida State. Florida State, their big kryptonite this year, they turned the ball over a ton. They ranked 254th in offensive turnover percentage. However, Michigan is good on defense, really, really good on defense. They ranked 10th in defense on Haslametrics, 9th in defense on KenPom. However, they don't force turnovers at all. They rank 337th in defensive turnover percentage, 337th in defensive steals percentage. So my thought here is that if Florida State could hold on to the ball, not turn the ball over, I think they have the size to deal with Dickinson. And I think that they have a really efficient offense to keep up with Michigan's as well. 14th in adjusted offense, 16th in 3-point percentage. So they're right there with Michigan in that category, just slightly below. But maybe you take Livers out of the equation and Florida State may even be above it. I do like Florida State here at +2. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean 2.5. I think is a great. I'm seeing that number available in the marketplace, so I think 2.5 is good. I would not lay with Michigan in this spot. All of your points are very well founded. Florida State is a team that I think is better than people really know. Like Scotty Barnes is one of those guys that at any given moment could literally play like a top 5 pick. He's been a little inconsistent. Florida State's been a little turnover prone. That's where I see the struggles with Michigan. That's what LSU wasn't able to do in the game the other night, is they were not able to close it out. They had the lead. They had momentum. They could not find a way to slow the game down and get it to triple zeros. If you play that game 100 times between LSU and Michigan, I bet LSU wins more than Michigan does. I do firmly believe that. That game was not a favorable situation for them. And I think Florida State, which plays at a similar pace with similar athletes, is going to have similar issues, is going to cause similar issues for Michigan. The difference is I think Florida State is a little bit more apt to finish because they have a little bit more experience. I trust the chief, as I like to call him, Leonard Hamilton, a little bit more in that spot than I would trust, some other coaches. So I think the only way I would play this is Florida State. I'm not to the window yet. I might get there 2.5. If I can grab 3, I'd love it. 2 is a dividing line for me. If it gets to 2, I will not bet it. 2 is usually my college basketball stopping point. So I'm hoping to get 3, and I think Florida State's probably the sharper side.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love Leonard Hamilton's system. His teams are built to play in the tournament the way that they're, great, usually great defensively. They're huge, really long. So yeah, I am trusting Florida State here. I like them a lot. But moving on to number 2 Alabama against number 11 UCLA. Another Pac-12 game here. We got Alabama at -6.5 in the game. Over under at 145.5. Alabama, one of the most elite defensive teams in the country. They were originally one of my Final Four picks. I still feel pretty good about that pick for them to make the Final Four. They rank 3rd on KenPom in adjusted defense and 8th in opponent 3-point percentage on KenPom as well at 28.9. So this is a really good defensive team. Again, another team that's pretty deep as well. Herb Jones, Quinterly, Petty. They have so many guys. They're incredibly coached. I've been hyping up Nate Oates since his times back at Buffalo. I wanted Penn State to hire him back in the day, and Prime White from Buffalo. But obviously, look, he's at Bama now. He's running a program that I believe could turn into a juggernaut under him. He's a great coach. Now, we mentioned before kind of fading teams, staying away from teams that aren't great on the defensive end. That's kind of like UCLA here. They are a very offensively efficient team, but they aren't great on defense. That worries me a little bit in this game. I do like Alabama to win. I don't know if I'm going to get to this 6.5 number because it does seem like a lot of points, but Alabama did just have that dominant performance against Maryland, and I do feel pretty good about their chances of making the Final Four.
Yeah, and I don't love Mick Cronin in this spot either, to be perfectly frank. I just don't think he's done a great job in the tournament. At least his numbers say he hasn't. He's done better in this tournament. He's gotten a little lucky. Michigan State was not a Michigan State team that I think had the mental, druthers to really stay in that game. Once it got to overtime, they blew the late lead. BYU is just totally flat. For BYU and that offense to only score 62 points against the, as you said, a UCLA defense that's been porous. BYU just came out flat. And then they get to play Abilene Christian, who's, just the sweetheart of the tournament, but not a team that I think had a lot of staying power because their offense was poor. Now you get Alabama, who is run and gun, chuck up a million threes, Nate Oates, I just don't like this matchup for UCLA. I think the spread's probably right. I think I see Bama winning by double digits more scenarios than I do them winning by 2 or 3. So I think if you wanted to play Bama here, I certainly can't fault you, but this is not one of the games I'm going to be playing this weekend.
Yeah, I'm not completely sure whether or not I'm going to play Bama at 6.5, but I do like this Bama team a lot going forward. But moving into this last game here, number 6 USC against number 7 Oregon, an all Pac-12 game, 9:45 p.m. Eastern time tip. USC favored by 2.5 in this game. And now I believe I'm seeing it on FanDuel actually at -2, so it's gone down a little bit, half point. Over under at 139.5. I love this USC team more than I think I even realized. And look, yeah, I'm basing it off of a couple of games against Drake and, against Kansas. But that performance against Kansas was absolutely dominant. One of the reasons I love USC here, I've mentioned in previous videos, I absolutely love well-rounded teams in the NCAA tournament. You need to have a good offense and you need to have a good defense. You can't really get away with not being good on one end of the floor in the NCAA tournament. And USC, they have that. They are obviously great on offense and even better on defense. Evan Mobley and his brother Isaiah Mobley, they've been unbelievable in the tournament. Evan Mobley, we know, is probably going to be second or third overall pick. As a result, that this team, they guard the rim so well. I believe they're second on Haslametrics in opponent near proximity percentage, meaning that teams cannot score in the paint against them. And Oregon, a team that they've struggled on defense. Yes, they were able to, their offense is very efficient. So they were able to score a ton of points against this Iowa team that couldn't defend at all. We're worse than them on defense. But let's not forget Oregon. They let up a ton of points themselves here. I think that ultimately USC's defense, whether it's down low or whether it's just guarding the perimeter, I think that they're going to stop this Oregon team enough to the point where I think they cover the 2-point spread. I like USC a lot in this game, and I'm actually curious to see how USC were to do in a future game against Gonzaga as well.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I'm sorry, I'm locking in a bet right now on the Miami Heat because they just traded for Victor Oladipo, which is a monster move. Now I can get back to USC. Tremendous coach. Probably one of the best coaches I think I've seen in the tournament start ever. 9-0 against the spread in his first 9 tournament games for Andy Enfield. An innovative guy. Goes to Gulf Coast, Dunk City. We know about that story. And then kind of gets lost in the shuffle of USC for a few years, going through a massive rebuild, sanctions, the OJ Mayo stuff, all that stuff, kind of transpiring and just kind of unloading over the last 5-10 years. And now he's really built this program up. You don't realize it. He's been the coach at USC for almost 8 years now. Actually, this is his 8th season. So he's built an absolute rock star program. He's a tremendous recruiter. And I don't want to sell Dana Altman short, who is another great coach in his own right. I just feel like USC is just deeper and bigger. In fact, like they beat Oregon by 14 back in late February. That was without Isaiah Mobley. They only had one of the Mobley brothers in that game. So I just don't see, I just feel like the line movement in USC is really kind of prominent here. I love the coach. And again, if you're giving me, I have to lay points now, which is obviously less than ideal. But if you're giving me it at 2, if you get it at 2, again, that's the dividing line for me. 2 is a key number in college basketball. People don't realize that it is. A very sharp bettor told me that very recently, and I've been using it, and it's been helping me. 2 is a very key number in college basketball. I would not lay 2.5. I'm fine with laying 2. Obviously would prefer 1.5, but I think USC is the only way to play this.
Yeah, and one other stat here from USC, they're first on Haslametrics.com in defensive field goal percentage, in addition to that second in defensive near proximity ratings. So this team, they just lock up completely. And again, I love Evan Mobley. He is so impressive to watch. He's going to be a star in the NBA, in my opinion. Now, before we head off here and wrap up the show, wanted to know, Jared, if you have any futures that you are looking at for the rest of this tournament.
Well, ironically enough, I actually do have a future rolling right now for Oregon to make the Final Four. It's a juicy one at 25-1. I have a buddy that got 30-1, which is really nice. The way I'll probably play it is I'll probably just bet USC for the game, and we'll just go from there. If I lose the USC bet, that means I've got Oregon in an Elite Eight with a 25-1 ticket in my back pocket against Gonzaga. And then I'll probably hedge out there because I just don't see this Gonzaga team not getting to the Final Four. And the goal really with that bet all along was to get them. I also cashed Oregon in the Sweet 16. Obviously that's over already, but the goal all along was to get Oregon into the Elite Eight against Gonzaga. And then I felt like I was going to have a good chance. I did not expect USC to be as strong as they were. So that's why I'm probably going to bet USC in this game just to come off of that a little bit, but that's the only future I have rolling right now.
Yeah, that is interesting. So two interesting lines I was looking at. If you wanted to bet the exact outcome of the NCAA tournament final, I think that, you could get Gonzaga over Baylor. Look, I know it's chalk, but it looks like those are by far two of the best teams. People will, panic a little bit about having, betting 2-1s to make it to the final. But, the best teams are the best teams, in my opinion, right now. I think that Gonzaga and Baylor are pretty much head over heels, at least with Isaiah Livers out. Head over heels better than anybody else. So you get that at plus 550. I think that's interesting. I also think Gonzaga over Loyola at 12-1. I think that's interesting as well. Look, I already mentioned I'm a huge fan of this Loyola team. I just think that they're built for March Madness. And I think that if they could get past Oregon State, they could possibly, they'll either face a Houston team, which will definitely be a tough matchup, but they could, they face a Syracuse team in the Elite Eight. And I'm interested to see what happens there, because obviously we were talking about Loyola locks up. Syracuse has been red hot from three. If they face a Syracuse in the Elite Eight, I'm interested to see what would happen there. But I would not be surprised, actually, if Loyola could make a Butler type run in this tournament, possibly make it all the way to the end. So I don't know. I think that I just thought it was an interesting line at 12-1, but that was what I was looking at. Interesting to hear your Oregon Final Four bet as well. But once again, thank you for coming on the show, Jared. I really appreciate it.
Of course, Dylan. Good luck with the bets this weekend, man.
Yes. And once again, you could follow Jared on Twitter at Jared Lee Smith. You could follow me on Twitter at sports_Burd. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and comment with, some bets that you like for this weekend, possible futures you like. Curious to see everyone's thoughts. Goodbye, everyone, and good luck with your Sweet 16 betting.